Hi students, I am Sudharani Ainampudi, lecturer in Botany, Narayana Medical Academy. Now, in this session, we are going to discuss the topic respiration in plants. Students, now let us see what are the different subtopics we are going to explain in the chapter respiration in plants. And here first let us deal with introduction part. There in the introduction we follow what type of reaction respiration is and what is the significance of respiration, what is its importance in living organisms. Then, and the second subtopic, do plants breathe? And maybe some of you had some query, is plants respire? Yes, of course, they respire as well as they breathe, but how they breathe? Do plants breathe? And how they perform breathing, let us discuss in that. And now the third one, types of respiration. As all of you know very well, there are two types of respiration, the aerobic and anaerobic respiration. Then, and the steps involved in respiratory mechanism, there that is glycolysis, and glycolysis is the core respiration, and that is the common step in both aerobic and anaerobic respiration. And so we will discuss glycolysis. And then coming to the next one, fermentation. Fermentation is exclusive for anaerobic respiration. In other words, we may refer it as anaerobic respiration because fermentation occurs only during anaerobic respiration. Then we go for the mechanism of aerobic respiration, and there the introduction for aerobic respiration, and we follow the steps involved in aerobic respiration like TCA cycle, that is Krebs cycle in other words, and then electron transport system and oxidative phosphorylation, how the energy liberated during the respiratory breakdown, during the respiratory breakdown of glucose molecule, and how it is converted into ATP. Then we discuss respiratory balance sheet for one glucose molecule involved in aerobic respiration. Then we discuss amphibolic pathway concept and aerobic respiration considered as amphibolic pathway because the carbohydrate skeletons that are formed during aerobic respiration may deviated and involved in the synthesis of other chemical compounds like amino acids, proteins, fats, lipids, etc. So that is amphibolic pathway, amphibolic nature of aerobic respiration we discuss. Then the last one, respiratory coefficient, and simply we can refer it as RQ. How to estimate the RQ value of different respiratory substrates like carbohydrates, fats and proteins. In the introduction part of respiration, we follow two questions. What kind of reaction respiration is? Now let us discuss. As you know, respiration is nothing but oxidation of food materials so that the energy get liberated, and of course ultimately it is packed in the form of useful energy, available form of energy, that is ATP. So for the production of ATP, the food materials are oxidized, here we followed. So respiration is basically a type of oxidation reaction. Okay, here the food material carbohydrates undergo respiratory breakdown, that is oxidation, while liberating energy in stepwise manner methodically, and that energy liberated is converted into chemical energy, and that is available form of energy, that is ATP. So here, and during this oxidation of food material, the food material which is in the form of potential energy, finally the energy liberated from the food material, that is potential energy, is converted into kinetic energy, that is ATP. So here potential energy mean carbohydrates is 6H12O6 we can follow, and finally the energy in the carbohydrate and get liberated and packed in the form of ATP. So can we say respiration is an energy conversion process? Yes. What kind of energy conversion it is? Conversion of potential energy to kinetic energy. So, and it is an oxidation step or oxidation process, and that is an energy conversion process. And during oxidation of food material, the carbohydrate, which is the complex substance, finally broken down into carbon dioxide and water. So, the complex food material broken down into simpler substances like carbon dioxide and water. So, we can say respiration is, it's a catabolic process. So, respiration, what kind of reaction it is? It is an oxidation reaction, oxidation process, and it is a catabolic process, and of course it is energy liberating process. So, exerganic process. And the energy liberated from the food material, from carbohydrates, is converted in the form of kinetic energy, the chemical energy, that is ATP. So, it is an energy conversion process. And what kind of energy conversion it is? Potential energy to kinetic energy. Now, let us follow the second question here. What is its significance? The significance of respiration already we followed. Production of chemical energy, the available form of energy, that is ATP, adenosine triphosphate, which is the available form of energy for cellular activities and considered as energy currency or cellular currency. So, the significance of respiration is the production of energy currency, that is ATP, and make that chemical energy available for cellular activities. Okay. Now, let us follow the next subtopic. Do plants breathe? And all living organisms, they respire, you know, but there are two types of respiration may you come across in your schooling, that is bodily respiration and cellular respiration. Bodily respiration is nothing but breathing, external, whereas cellular respiration occur in the cells of the living organisms, and that is the so-called respiration that we followed, which is performed by the cellular structures like mitochondria. So, and here in this topic, do plants breathe? We are going to discuss how plants, they perform that external respiration, that is so called breathing phenomenon. Okay, that is nothing but gaseous exchange. The breathing in plants is nothing but gaseous exchange. So, how plants perform gaseous exchange? Let us recollect a small comparison between plants and animals. Is animals breathe? And do we perform gaseous exchange? That is by respiratory system, and that is through nostrils. Okay, and but here in plants, is plants breathe? Of course, like us, they also breathe and they also perform gaseous exchange. But any nostrils and such respiratory system like lungs are there in the plant body? No. But how they perform breathing? That is gaseous exchange process, and well-known concept, that is stomata. Plants had the pores on their aerial parts, and the pores are called stomata. So, plants also breathe and they perform external respiration, that is gaseous exchange, and they perform gaseous exchange, that is uptake of oxygen and liberation of carbon dioxide during respiration. Okay, and in addition, plants can perform photosynthesis now. Previously we followed, they uptake carbon dioxide and eval oxygen. So, vice versa we follow, plants perform uptake of oxygen and evolution of carbon dioxide just like us during respiration, that is gaseous exchange performed by stomata. And during photosynthesis, additionally they perform uptake of carbon dioxide and evolution of oxygen to restore that oxygen in the environment. Previously we followed also by stomata. So, and the aerial body parts of the plant, they bear some pores. So, the plant body in aerial parts is porous, and the pores which are called stomata, and they are meant for gaseous exchange and they allow the gases to pass through. Okay? But later, how the gases are transported? To perform aerobic respiration, oxygen should be supplied to the cells now. So, how that cell to cell transportation of oxygen is observed in plants, and for that, and plants, they do not require any translocation mechanism just like animals with respiratory system have. Very simply, the plants, they allow the translocation of gases, and that is transport of gases in their body, cell to cell transport. For all the cells, the air, that is oxygen or whatever the gases, they are transported by simple diffusion process. Because as the plant body in the aerial parts totally contain pores from periphery to the center through the pores and later cell to cell transportation, that is by simple diffusion, the gases are supplied to all parts of the plant body and there is no need of translocation, and simply transportation is enough, and that is by diffusion process gaseous exchange takes place, whereas the aerial parts on the air surface, they contain some special pores called stomata. Okay, so plants also show breathing, and that is gaseous exchange process, and the pores in the aerial parts of plant body, that is stomata, perform gaseous exchange. Later the gases that enter into the plant body, no need of long distance transport, no need of translocation, short distance traveling of gases is allowed by simple diffusion. So cell to cell transportation of gases occur by diffusion process. Okay. Coming to types of respiration, basically there are two types of respirations which are very familiar for us, anaerobic respiration and aerobic respiration. Now let us see what is anaerobic respiration. Anaerobic respiration is the primitive type of respiration. It is the first type of respiration observed in the universe, mean on the earth, and that is primitive type. And anaerobic respiration occur without the utilization or without the involvement of oxygen. Here the food material, that is carbohydrate, undergo anaerobic breakdown. Of course it is also breakdown and oxidation, but undergo anaerobic breakdown and partial breakdown and form ethyl alcohol while evolving carbon dioxide. Okay, because here we mentioned ethyl alcohol, and mostly the end product of anaerobic respiration in majority of anaerobes is alcohol, and that is alcoholic fermentation. So we consider here ethyl alcohol, but it may not be ethyl alcohol always, maybe lactic acid, acetic acid, etc., or other products which are the end products of anaerobic respiration we had. But and majority and popularly we follow anaerobic respiration with this equation, that carbohydrate undergo anaerobic breakdown in the absence of oxygen, undergo partial oxidation, and here 2 molecules of ethyl alcohol and 2 molecules of carbon dioxide evolved we followed, and during this process only certain amount of energy, and we can say very less amount of energy get liberated from the food material, that is carbohydrate, that is only 54 kilocalories of energy. Okay, and in that 54 kilocalories also only a little amount of energy is packed in the form of ATP, and we get the net gain only 2 ATP molecules as net gain due to this anaerobic respiration of 1 glucose molecule. And what are the steps involved in anaerobic respiration? Now let us see. And the first step of any kind of respiration is glycolysis. So anaerobic respiration also start with glycolysis, and the second step, and that is called fermentation. So the steps involved in anaerobic respiration are glycolysis and fermentation. Fermentation is exclusive for anaerobic respiration. So fermentation itself means anaerobic respiration, whereas glycolysis is common for both anaerobic and aerobic respiration. So to follow the mechanism of anaerobic respiration, we follow 2 steps involved, that is glycolysis and fermentation. And here no way mitochondria involved in anaerobic respiration we observed, because glycolysis occur in cytosol, whereas fermentation also occur in the cytosol, that means cytoplasm. So totally anaerobic respiration occur in cytoplasm, and mitochondria is not involved in anaerobic respiration. Okay. Now let us follow what is aerobic respiration. Aerobic respiration is the respiration, that is the breakdown of the food material in presence of oxygen and by utilizing oxygen, and that is called aerobic respiration. Here we followed the equation that represent the aerobic breakdown of 1 glucose molecule while utilizing 6 molecules of oxygen, and finally completely broken down, undergo complete oxidation and completely broken down into 6 molecules of carbon dioxide and 6 water molecules, while evolving the energy approximately 686 kilocalories. So, whatever the energy hidden in the glucose molecule is totally get liberated, and because it undergo complete breakdown or complete oxidation in presence of oxygen. So, the total energy, that is 686 kilocalories, get liberated, but of course, and some energy is packed in the form of ATP, and the remaining part of energy may be wasted as heat, and here we can calculate, and finally we got 38 ATP as net gain. Of course, the energy liberated is 686 kilocalories, but only certain amount of energy is packed in the form of available form, that is ATP, and we can follow that net gain of ATP for one glucose in aerobic respiration as 38 ATP molecules. Okay. Now coming to the steps involved in aerobic respiration, and of course, any kind of respiration start with glycolysis. So, glycolysis is the first step of aerobic respiration, okay, and then next we follow oxidative decarboxylation, in other words called link reaction, and the next step is Krebs cycle. Krebs cycle also can be referred as TCA cycle, tricarboxylic acid cycle, and the fourth step, very important step, the energy get liberated during all these steps finally converted into ATP molecules, and that is electron transport system with oxidative phosphorylation. Electron transport system associated with oxidative phosphorylation. Okay, so as we follow aerobic respiration part, aerobic respiration is the complete breakdown of one glucose molecule in presence of oxygen, and by utilizing oxygen totally broken down into carbon dioxide and water, while liberating the total energy in the glucose molecule, but of course only certain part of energy is packed in the form of available energy, that is ATP. And the different steps involved in aerobic respiration are glycolysis, the first step, by which the glucose molecule split into two molecules of pyruvic acid, and the second one oxidative decarboxylation. Pyruvic acid further undergo oxidation and decarboxylation and convert into acetyl coenzyme A. Now this acetyl coenzyme A in mitochondria involved in Krebs cycle reactions, that is TCA cycle, and undergo complete breakdown into carbon dioxide and water, and finally as energy liberated in these three steps majorly packed in the form of reduced coenzymes, that is NADH2 and FADH2, but conversion of that energy into ATP is essential because the cellular currency or available form of energy is only ATP. So, whatever energy packed in the form of NADH2 and FADH2 finally in the last step in electron transport system, and that get liberated again and is packed in the form of ATP by a process called oxidative phosphorylation. Students, now and may all of you are clear how we can differentiate anaerobic and aerobic respiration. Okay. Now let us follow the core respiratory pathway, and which is common for both aerobic and anaerobic respiration, that is glycolysis. As we follow the word glycolysis, lysis mean breakdown, glyco mean glucose, as we consider the simple respiratory substrate, the common respiratory substrate. So, glucose here undergo lysis, that is breakdown, and that 6 carbon compound glucose undergo glycolytic pathway and finally split into 2 molecules of pyruvic acid, which are 3 carbon compounds. So, a hexose molecule, that is glucose, 6 carbon compound, by various biochemical reactions in this pathway finally broken down into 2 molecules of 3 carbon compounds, that is pyruvic acid. So, it is a kind of partial breakdown of glucose into 2 molecules of pyruvic acid. But what are the different steps involved in glycolysis? Okay, and what are the substrate molecule glucose, of course, what are the requirements, what are the reactions and enzymes that are involved? Let us take a glance on glycolysis now. And regarding glycolysis, there are few other names also. which refer glycolysis, and they are EMP pathway and HDP pathway. And the full form of EMP pathway, Embden, Meyerhoff and Paranas pathway. Glycolysis was traced out by these total biochemical reactions together follow that glycolytic pathway, and this glycolytic pathway was traced out by three scientists called Embden, Meyerhoff and Paranas. So, glycolysis, glycolytic pathway is also can be referred as EMP pathway, Embden, Meyerhoff and Paranas pathway, and it is also called as HDP pathway, hexose diphosphate pathway. And here fructose 1,6 bias phosphate is a hexose with two phosphates involved in the pathway. So, some may refer this pathway as HDP pathway, but mainly the word glycolysis we follow here, and that is splitting of glucose molecule into two molecules of pyruvic acid by a series of reactions, stepwise breakdown. Okay? And during glycolysis we observe totally 10 reactions, as we followed with their number also here. One by one let us follow, and these series of biochemical reactions together known as glycolysis or glycolytic pathway. And here oxygen is not at all involved, and presence of oxygen is not at all required. So, regarding glycolytic pathway, which is common for both anaerobic and aerobic respiration, there is no involvement of oxygen and it occur independent of oxygen. So, glycolysis occur either in presence of oxygen during aerobic respiration, also in the absence of oxygen, that is in anaerobic respiration. So, glycolysis occur independent of oxygen. Okay. Now, let us sort out the reactions. At the end we discuss the energetics and all. Now, the first reaction in glycolysis, that is glucose, the simple respiratory substrate or common respiratory substrate, which is a hexose 6 carbon compound, undergo the first reaction, that is phosphorylation. For that, one ATP molecule utilized here and converted into glucose 6 phosphate, mean phosphate attached to the 6th carbon of glucose and one phosphate attached to glucose. It is glucose monophosphate we can say. And now that glucose monophosphate undergo isomerization and converted into fructose monophosphate, that is fructose 6 phosphate. Okay. Then that fructose monophosphate undergo phosphorylation again, and this is the second phosphorylation, and here one ATP molecule, one more ATP molecule is utilized. So, the substrates are phosphorylated here and here. For that, 2 ATP molecules are utilized, and finally the substrate glucose converted into fructose biphosphate, that is fructose 1,6 bias phosphate, by utilizing 2 ATP molecules. Okay. Now, ready for cleavage reaction. Now, that fructose bias phosphate undergo cleavage process catalyzed by an enzyme aldolase and cleaves into two trioses, and they are DHAP and G3P. G3P glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate or phosphoglyceraldehyde. Okay. And that is a triose sugar, and one more triose sugar here, that is ketone sugar, DHAP dihydroxyacetone phosphate. Now, and G3P further undergo oxidation process and continue glycolytic pathway. But DHAP never act like the substrate for oxidation. It cannot undergo oxidation directly. So, here isomerization of DHAP molecule into G3P molecule is required. So, here the DHAP, which is not the substrate for oxidation, which do not undergo oxidation, so may not continue further reactions. So, it is isomerized into G3P molecule by the process isomerization, and triose phosphate isomerase catalyze the reaction. Okay. So, now and 2 G3P molecules we consider, because one G3P directly formed by cleavage and the other G3P is added by the isomerization process of DHAP. So, for one glucose, now let us consider 2 G3P molecules continue the process of glycolysis.